Greetings and welcome to Legacies of Wavryn, Lore of the Endelment. This will be chapter 44 of this reading. Having decided to leave the riddle alone, everyone knew a fight was inevitable ahead, so we spent about a week with intense training to reach our higher power level within both our normal abilities and the Endelment ones. We trained until Monday came around. Damn it. However, this time, I was going to get what I want. No one, not even the Dominion, was going to keep me from having control over this day. I found that, as the Endelment, my powers grew far faster than any normal being, which both impressed me and scared me. It was not normal. But then again, neither was I. My family and friends were able to unlock their Endelment abilities easily, but weren't as powerful as mine. However, Serena and Baraku weren't able to gain their Endelment abilities, but I knew Baraku didn't try hard enough. I was sure he had something else up his, well, collar. Serena, on the other hand, probably didn't want to try as well, only because she didn't feel safe doing so. And even though the Ancient couldn't progress in his powers, JJ still persisted and trained with us. Amazingly, that Monday was also one day before the birth year for my home world. Surprisingly, it was also the birth year for Earth. However, my family and friends all just stayed inside, waiting for something to happen. My body was completely healed, and I felt far better than I had ever been since I came to Earth, which wasn't much. I sat at my desk to type up any and all information I had that I didn't want to reveal until it was needed, while everyone else was occupied with watching the news. Serena and Nanye stood at my right side, with Wolf and Fox at my left. Amber and Jewel were on the left side couch, Joey and Nanale on the right side couch, and Baraku lying in the center of the living room. JJ sat on the floor just in front of my desk, while Blight hovered over the Haroga's head. The ball of energy was calm now and went back to his old self, whistling that same familiar tune that I only remember Grandpa ever knowing. No one had figured out the Legends riddle yet. No one but me, of course. As I finished up with one last piece of information, I called out, "Apelec."
"Yes, my lord,"
the computer responded. "Am I the only one that you are programmed to let use you?"
"Yes, my lord. Because, if you gain an enemy that steals me, then I won't be able to give them your information."
"Can multiple people use you?"
"Yes, but I must get their vocals in order for me to allow them to access my information."
Just as I finished, I saved everything into the system, then turned towards my wife and asked, "Serena, my pretty and cute little half-fox girl, can you come here, please?" Serena laughed at that as she turned to me with a smile and asked, "Why?" In response to her question, I gave a light smile and said, "Because I love you so much that I want to tell you something." My wife moved closer to me as she leaned down, somewhat becoming eye level with me, and joyfully asked, "You figured out that you're not going to die when you fight Dominic?" With that, Apelec said,
"Vocals verified. Voice lock now in effect for second party member, Serena Shero."
I looked up at my wife and replied, "Sadly enough, no." Just as I said that, she quickly grew upset, maybe even a bit angry. Then I continued, "But I do know one thing. I know what that bastard is trying to do with the two planets." Serena's right fox ear pointed straight up as her left bent down slightly, looking at me confused yet interested, and asked, "Really? What?" She stood up and watched the computer, while I turned back to Apelec, moved him to have both screens facing up, and said, "Apelec, need you to bring up the simulation that I created with Bodor and Earth.
Accessing,
the computer said. All of the cameras placed a foot-big hologram half a foot up from the screens, with them showing both Bodor and Earth as they were at the present time. Only a simple flight in between the atmospheres to reach either one. With the hologram up, I said, "This is how the two worlds look like now. From what I remembered in history, Father's going by a very old and very weird chemistry that our race used to use in order to save two planets from dying. It was never recorded that it worked, but it was just known throughout history that it was possible to do, yet very dangerous. I grabbed Bodor with my right hand and Earth with my left and pulled them back, having them just 6 inches away in the simulation. I then slowly started to move them closer as I continued. It works by colliding the two planets together in one or both of their birth periods till either cores collide. With that, I simulated the two planets hitting each other and lowered my hands, where we watched the spheres form into a new planet as I continued. But instead of the cores exploding, their powers are supposed to conjure up a way of fusion that allows the two cores to combine as one, where it will recreate a whole new planet that acts as the two previous worlds. The new planet formed to grow slightly bigger than the first two, with new markings for its structure. There were a few mountains that were tall enough to just barely break past the mesosphere, along with various sizes of islands floating around in the stratosphere, and large strikes of lightning constantly flying around the entire atmosphere of the planet. It was as if being violent, yet majestic and beautiful. When the two planets fused together, those standing around me examined the new world for a bit. Then Serena said, "Not bad. The new planet seemed more stable, even more refined. Quite better than the two old ones." "I love it," Nanye said. However, Wolf crossed her arms and said, "I don't. It's too wild." "I agree with Wolfie," Fox complied. Yet even with all those responses, I only replied to my wife's and said, "That's right. But there's two things wrong with this equation, from what I've gathered to understand." I adjusted my glasses and looked up at Serena, while she stood upright and looked down at me, and I continued. 1. Neither planet is dying. Bodor is already dead, so it no longer has a planetary core. But Earth isn't anywhere close to dying, completely healthy, which means its core is still pure and rich. So what will happen if you try to fuse the two together the way they are now? I turned back to the laptop and said, "Apelec, redo simulation. Alternate ending."
Very well, my lord,
the computer responded. The simulation started up again and showed the two planets colliding, but this time things were different. Instead of them fusing, Earth exploded with enough power to destroy both planets and scatter the broken bits of dirt throughout Earth's solar system. Just as the explosion happened, Serena jumped a bit and said, "Son of a bitch." Fox was excited with what she saw and said, "Awesome! Do it again!" Ignoring the Alecans, I moved to close up Apelec and stood to get myself a soda. Soda. I love human-made soda, yet I hate humans. Why the irony? Everyone else turned back to watch the TV, while Serena just watched me motion for the kitchen. I walked back over and stood with my wife and said, "Even though both simulations are plausible, it's most likely that the two planets will explode rather than create a new one." Serena placed her right hand on her forehead while putting her left hand on her hip, shaking her head a bit as she said, "Creator, damn you, Dominic." She then lowered both of her hands as she looked back over at me and asked, "So you think he's going to try and fuse the two worlds together in order to create a new one for him to rule?" He doesn't know of what will happen without 2 anemic planetary cores? Yes. Which means we have to stop him. Then do so, Zaec, familiar voice said. I quickly turned to my left slightly to see Father standing in the living room, directly in front of the TV, with his arms crossed over his chest. He, of course, had unexplainable anger in his face and tone as he continued, "That is, if you can." I froze up from his presence and thought, what the hell? How did he get here without me knowing? With that, Shadow sarcastically said, "Dad's home." "Shut up, Shadow," Light barked. Baraku stood and snarled at Father, while Wolf slowly looked over at me and said, "Sorry, my lord. I couldn't warn you quick enough." I froze up and he just showed up out of nowhere. Father lowered his left hand and moved his right to call something with his powers. My soda, which was my last one and I had just opened, flew over to him. Once in his hands, Father drank my soda, where I completely turned myself towards him and yelled, "Hey, that was my last can, you bastard!" Dominic finished my soda, then crushed the can in his hand as he looked over at me in anger and yelled, "How dare you insult me, Zaec?" "Because I can, you jackass." Everyone stood against Father and began yelling at him with every offensive word in their vocabulary. After a few seconds, he grew even more angry and tossed the can aside. He clenched his fist tight and leaned his head back a bit, where he shouted, "Silence!" Immediately, his aura flared from his body, and he used his powers to increase the gravity within the room by 5 times its normal amount. We barely nudged from his might. Dominic calmed down and released us from the aura pressure, then moved his head straight as he looked back at me and said, "I'm here for one reason and one reason only. To reunite our race and create a new life with the humans. And I don't want to do it without my great prince, Zaec, Zaec, and Shero at my side." I squinted my eyes slightly and asked, "You killed Eyeless?" Father laughed at that as he glanced down at his right side, then looked back at me with a light smile and said, "I'm surprised that you caught that, my son. And, of course, yes. I wasn't going to cooperate with me no matter what I gave him. I was surprised to find him the way he was, battered and broken from the fight between you two." I just grew angry at that, knowing he didn't give my brother a fair fight, as he continued, "I got rid of his meaningless existence. It wasn't worth having at my side when I finally take over this pathetic world of weaklings." I became even more angry at Father and was about to motion to strike him, but Serena quickly grabbed my right arm with both of her arms and held me back. I glanced at my wife, noticing her shaking her head slightly, then stopped myself from going towards that royal retard as my wife lowered her hands. Watching me, Father chuckled a bit, then said, "Angry over the loss of your elder brother now? Good. Your anger will bring me joy once put into my use." "Shut the fuck up," I barked. "You're a heartless and unworthy being of existence, demonion. Worse than humans. It wouldn't be worth calling you a Quellan, seeing as it would only be more of a compliment. I'm not angry about Eyeless's death. I'm angry about you." "Whatever," Father said, only giving me a blank stare. "It's not like you can stop me anyways, my prince. Even as this ridiculous Endelment. I have, and always will be, far more powerful than you." I raised my left hand slightly to call my coat up to me, both pistols in their holsters, then I cautiously placed it on. Father laughed again, then smiled as he said, "You still have those old relics and that ugly piece of dead skin? Ridiculous. Jijiku never did have good taste and style, and certainly wasn't smart with inventions. I first adjusted my coat, then my glasses, then I lowered my hands and said, "I heard you were the one who killed him, father. You killed Grandpa, along with Mother, Zaec, and if given the chance you would have killed Salus too, if not for his insane outburst." "You're damn right I killed them," he barked. "Nothing but a bunch of worthless beings of life that would not take pride in their heritage, especially Jijiku. Being a Kexan is something you must cherish, especially by showing those weaker than you how powerful you really are." Lightning started to jolt around Father's body as he raised his voice and yelled, "I am Dominic Halen Shero, King of Bodor and ruler of Wavryn. I am the most powerful being in the universe with no equal." Just then, the building began to rattle as he continued, "And to prove my fearsome power, I'm going to kill the very last thing that stands in my way of becoming emperor of this entire cosmos." Father raised his left hand to point at me as he viciously said, "I shall destroy you, Endelment. Then I shall obliterate all of you worthless friends." I quickly jolted towards Father with my right fist back, swinging as hard as I could to strike him in the center of his chest. With my punch, I forced Dominic through the entertainment center, balcony window, and wall, with enough force to still send him into Central Park, where he crashed into the ground. I stood where I had struck Father and faced out the hotel room, while I viciously said, "Not if I have anything to say about it, Dominion." I then glanced around the room for a second as I said, "This is it, everyone." I turned to face outside again as I continued, "This is our last stand against him. We have to end it now." With everyone readying against my father, Wolf said, "We are forever with you, my lord." "Of course," Baraku said. "Always," Joey complied. I glanced over at the three of them with a light smile, then looked back outside just as Blight flew over to me and said, "Wait, my lord, there's just one last thing." "What is it?" I asked. "If you break me, I do not stop working. If you touch me, I may be snared. If you lose me, nothing will matter. But just trust in me, and your journey may continue." Before I could answer the riddle, Blight moved back a foot so that he could jolt towards me. I was too confused to try and stop him before he hit against my chest and somehow quickly fused into my soul. Unable to figure out how to grab the ball out, I asked, "What the hell? What are you doing, Blight?" "Don't worry, my lord," Wardrick calmly said. "Just go." "Remember what you must do, my lord," Severick said. "Once you do, they shall be free." I stood quiet for a moment, then replied, "Okay." Hoping to end this horrid feud, my allies and I all jolted out after Father, to stop his corrupted empire once and for all. Father had slammed into the dirt headfirst in the center of the park, and as he stood up, his left arm across his chest and his hand under his right armpit, we entered the park and surrounded the Kexan with a 15-foot perimeter. However, as to Baraku's style of fighting, he stood at a distance to ready himself for a later part in the fight. Dominic turned to me, barely having to move to his right, and said, "Dealing sucker punches now, are we? Kind of a low blow in a way." "Shut up, Halen," I barked. "It's time we finally end this." I reached into my right coat pocket with my left hand for Rakar, but found it missing. Just as I realized it was gone, I looked over at where my left hand was and said, "What the?" Father started to chuckle, then removed his left hand from his right armpit to hold out Rakar as he asked, "Looking for this?" I looked back up at Father, surprised, then he continued, "You should really be more careful with your things, Raekin." you just might lose them. He then grasped Ricard tight in his left hand as he turned it around to have the back of his hand aimed up. Dominic formed Ricard into a long pitch-black katana with a simple small handguard and a foot-long hilt. I remembered that blade from one of my nightmares. It was him. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I wasn't going to lose. Seeing as I lost one blade, I decided to use the other, lowering my left hand and grabbing Ricard with my right. Father laughed for a bit, then said, "You plan to fight with a stick? You must be joking." Guess you don't really know everything about what I did this past year. I used my energy to form Ricard into its claymore state, then continued, "No wonder you don't know how this fight will end. Because if you knew it was to end with your own death, you wouldn't have even bothered showing your damn face." "That's it!" Father shouted as his aura flared up again. "I've had it with your insults. You're going to die by my hands." I moved into my fighting position with Ricard in defense, while I calmly and quietly said, "If need be, I'll gladly give my life to end yours." Storm clouds above started up again and brought forth heavy rain, along with loud vicious thunder as the wind blew hard against us. The day had finally come. The end was near, and I was one step away from destroying Father and his entire empire. While I stood against him, my emotions ran wild. I felt happy. I felt angry. I felt brutal and destructive. I felt at peace. I felt so good I could have cried in joy. I felt good knowing that I was the one, and only one, that was going to crush the Shero Empire. Yet somehow terrible. The empire that stood for so long as the most powerful legion in all of Wavryn was going to come crashing down by the very dynasty that started it. Whatever Father had up his sleeves to stop me now would never work. I had the ultimate ability in the very palm of my hands. The final battle for power had truly begun, yet I had already won. The Empire was at its end. This concludes the reading of Chapter 44. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, there'll be a link to my physical works in the description below. That being said, stay safe, take care. We'll see you again next week, reading Chapter 45.